Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and today's video is going to be a fun one. In today's video, I'm bringing some spice to the Jungle Cup, as I'm running a team consisting of INCINEROAR and Peck Altaria. Now, what does INCINEROAR do well in the Jungle Cup? Well, the answer is not a whole lot, except for absolutely melting any Forretress that it encounters. I'm running Fire Fang, Brutal Swing, and Flame Charge on INCINEROAR just to try and ramp up damage as much as possible, and I decided to run Peck on Altaria for a better Togekiss matchup. Now, to clarify, this is definitely not a team you should run if you care about climbing, but against all odds, I was able to go slightly positive with it. So, without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a pretty strong lead, Altaria into Furret. Well, if you're running a normal Altaria with Dragon Breath, it's a very strong matchup, so I assume with Peck, it should also be pretty decent as well. Sky Attack lands big damage onto the Furret, opponent safe switches into an Oranguru, and they are about to immediately regret that decision as in comes INCINEROAR. Oranguru is a Pokemon with very limited coverage, and that makes it a pretty poor safe switch. And the moment there's a Dark type on Oranguru just can't really do anything. I build up to the back-to-back Brutal Swings, my opponent doesn't ever really have a reason to shield, so the moment they do, I realize they're probably devastatingly weak to the INCINEROAR. So I decide to invest resources in the INCINEROAR, they pivot out, and they send in Furret. Even a Swift would do a ton of damage, so I put up the shield, they actually go for a Brick Break, and I pivot back into Altaria just to get outpaced and lose charge attack priority. That is a bit unfortunate, but because the Furret is switch locked, I should be able to go for an undercharge on the Sky Attack, and then get a pretty healthy Peck down. They still have a decent amount of HP remaining on the Oranguru, but I have so much energy loaded on the INCINEROAR. In the back, it's Wigglytuff, they're running a triple normal team, and unfortunately for them, they're about to get absolutely crushed. Wigglytuff does get the farm down, but now I can just bring in Credilli. And the moment my opponent throws energy, they should pivot into the Oranguru, so I can just queue up a zero-turn switch and get INCINEROAR back on the field. Icy Wind lands, in comes INCINEROAR, and I immediately fire off the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing at the Oranguru will take the knockout, back in comes the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff trying to degen Charm down, but not today. INCINEROAR farms down Wigglytuff, and that's a good game. We pick up a pretty nice lead in the next match, Altaria into Shadow Quagsire. If the Quagsire is staying in, they're going to be on Stone Edge, but one Stone Edge does not one-shot Altaria, so I'm very comfortable no-shielding. Stone Edge is going to connect. That is some pretty significant damage, but this is my best answer to Quagsire on the team, so I'm very happy that my opponent is not only staying in, but no-shielding the Sky Attack. My opponent will try and go for the CMP tie. I'm more than happy to just let the Altaria go, and instead, I'm just going to try and go for a massive farm down with Credilli. Unfortunately, I do get one turn bring-in, so I'm not able to sneak through an acid as they fire off the Aqua Tail. My opponent safe switches into Forretress, and they're about to regret that decision. In comes INCINEROAR, I sneak a Fire Fang as they fire off the Sand Tomb. I'm just going to shield once and fully farm down. The Quagsire is low enough that I should be able to farm that down as well. What does my opponent have in the back? They're going to have to bring in their final Pokemon. Forretress has been dealt with. In the back is Piloswine, and this game is over. Now I can boost up my damage with Flame Charge and just farm everything down. Shadow Piloswine getting absolutely melted. Don't look now, that's a full 1v3. INCINEROAR gets the endgame sweep, and that's a good game. We've got same leads as last game, Altaria into Shadow Quagsire once again. This time it's different. My opponent safe switches into Licky Licky, and I can respond with Credilli. Credilli has a very dominant matchup into Licky Licky. Licky Licky, unfortunately, just gets slowed down by these attack debuffs, and that makes the second Shadow Ball plus the rollouts unable to take the knockout, making it a very convincing matchup for the Credilli. Even though I have a Grass type on the team, Acid Credilli does actually do a pretty poor job at neutralizing Quagsire, so I'm pretty happy to get to use the Credilli here, because if it's on the Quagsire, that could definitely make life a bit uncomfortable. My opponent is going to no-shield, Grass Knot takes the knockout, back in comes the Quagsire. Quagsire is going to CMP tie, and I decide that I want shields up for INCINEROAR in the endgame, so I decide to just let Credilli go and send in the Altaria. I know from last game, I very comfortably survive a Stone Edge, so I'm always just going to be no-shielding here. Stone Edge can land, but I would rather have the shields for INCINEROAR, and my opponent baits with an Aqua Tail. Either they don't have Stone Edge, or they just ended up going for a very costly bait. I make the Sky Attack, I lose charge attack priority, but I'm still not in Stone Edge range. I no-shield, it's another Aqua Tail, my opponent keeps baiting, and it keeps coming back to bite them. Sky Attack is going to land, putting the Quagsire very low. Quagsire does have enough energy for a Stone Edge, and I decide at long last I will put up the shield, and they actually had it the whole time. In the back, they have Togekiss, and this game is over. Peck is going to be Altaria's best friend here. Sky Attack lands, that does do some pretty massive damage. I'm just going to look to farm up when I get to the Sky Attack, go for the switch, and catch the Psyshock onto Incineroar. That is double resisted. Opponent in absolute shambles, and now Incineroar gets the full farm down. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We see one of the scariest possible leads in the next match, sending Altaria into Gliscor. Gliscor is not a very commonly played Pokemon, but in my eyes, it's definitely one of the scariest. It can inflict horrifying damage with acrobatics or debuff your defense with Sand Tomb, and it's very hard to gauge which. I end up no shielding, I tank the acrobatics, but I feel pretty okay about letting the move land because I'm able to make a second Sky Attack and force either switch advantage or shield advantage. So I fire off the Sky Attack, Gliscor puts up the shield, and Gliscor does fully farm down. I decide that I'm going to sack the Credilli. I'm going to trust in 2-shield Incineroar. Probably not the greatest idea ever, but I'm hoping that Incineroar will be able to put in work in the endgame. My opponent safe switches into Furret and wins charge attack priority as I make it to the Rock Tomb. I need damage on the Furret and I need to lower their attack, so I will use my first shield and return fire with the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb is no shielded, I send in Incineroar. Furret does not even build up to bluff a Brick Break, so I feel very comfortable no shielding. Swift is debuffed, it's really not going to do much, and now, look at this, Incineroar gets the perfect farm down. I exit with all the energy I could ever ask for, in comes Charjabug, and this game is over. I get to launch Flame Charge, opponent actually caught it onto Gliscor, but unfortunately this is now a boosted Incineroar. There's just nothing this poor Charjabug can do. I'm able to make the back-to-back brutal swings, and that is going to seal it. That Charjabug was on screen. It felt like only for a few seconds. Those boosted Fire Fangs were lethal. Brutal swing, KOs the Charjabug, and this team gets another win. We move to the next match, Altaria into Forretress. This is basically the best case scenario lead for this team. This team is very, very strong into Forretress. That was kind of the goal behind the team, is eventually if you lead into a Forretress, they're going to have to pivot out, and then hopefully I can align my Incineroar onto it later in the game. The Sky Attack bait is successful, pulling a shield away from the Forretress, and Forretress will connect with the Rock Tomb. Now, I can make it to a Sky Attack, but unfortunately, Sky Attack at -1 is never going to threaten a shield from my opponent, so I decide to put up the shield and just keep farming. They save switch into Shadow Malamar, and I'm forced to send in the only thing I have closest to an answer, and that is the Incineroar. I'm expecting they're going to full send here, so I put up the shield, and they do go for the superpower. That is a very big call. Now I can fire off Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is going to be shielded, so my opponent wants to land a -1 superpower onto Incineroar. Incineroar, not the tankiest thing around, is able to hold on. Incineroar gets the farm down and exits with the Brutal Swing loaded. Brutal Swing not going to do much into their Togekiss, which they send in, so I pivot out and send in Altaria. Altaria lands the Sky Attack, that's big damage. I'm able to make Sky Attack #2 as well, and Altaria, just so much value in this endgame. That's going to get Togekiss very low. They exit with the charge attack loaded. I bring in Incineroar, and my opponent will win the charge attack priority tie. Aura Sphere knocks out Incineroar, but now it's Credilli versus Forretress in the endgame. And this is an endgame scenario where Credilli is going to win because my opponent is on Volt Switch. The one thing I will have to be very careful of will be the switch timer. My opponent will eventually be able to try and go for a catch. Them catching a Rock Tomb onto Kiss is their only way of winning the game. They fire off the Rock Tomb, now their switch timer will be up, and I have to be very careful. I have to ensure that I throw it in the middle of their Volt Switch. They wait a turn, they throw a Volt Switch, they go for the catch, and we do not let the catch happen, and that's gonna seal the win. Back in comes Forretress, Rock Tomb takes the knockout, and we're able to get that game. We move to the next match, leading Altaria into Spiritomb. Now this is a bit of a scary lead. Spiritomb has access to Rock Tomb, which hits for massive super effective damage into the Altaria. The only consolation here is I'm able to outpace the Spiritomb, but Spiritomb can very comfortably survive a Sky Attack. My hope is that I can neutralize the Spiritomb, and then with Spiritomb out of the way, hopefully Credilli and Incineroar will be able to do well in the back. I really don't want to concede farm to whatever my opponent has in the back, so I actually overfarm, taking one extra Sucker Punch of damage to leave Altaria as low as I possibly can. In comes Mantine. Mantine still gets a 3 wing attack farm down, and I send in Credilli, very happy that I have switch advantage. Mantine onto Incineroar would be instant game over. Mantine is just simply too bulky. They fire off the Aerial Ace, and I'm going to immediately hit back hard with the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb will inflict some serious damage. Mantine is going to no shield in the back. They have a non-Shadow Tyranitar, and I have lost this game. If this was a Shadow Tyranitar, maybe there's a chance that I can Fire Fang it down, but the non-Shadow Tyranitar is so much bulkier. They survive these Fire Fangs like it's nothing. I put up the shield as they go not for the Stone Edge, but for the Brutal Swing Fate, as a bad scenario gets even worse. Even with this Tyranitar being debuffed, there's just no chance for me to win. My opponent no shields the Brutal Swing, but I just simply can never get a Fire Fang down. My opponent has energy on the Mantine as well. I shield up the Stone Edge. I will make it to another Brutal Swing, but I have no way of winning this game. My opponent has too much energy. Even if I catch the Stone Edge onto Credilli, I simply don't win because I could never get rid of the Mantine. Mantine would just knock out the Incineroar. So I let the Incineroar go, I send back in the Credilli, and look how much energy they had. They already had an Ice Beam loaded. Ice Beam KOs the Credilli. What a team from my opponent. Very well played. We move to the next match, picking up a very scary lead, Altaria into Shadow Qwilfish. Shadow Qwilfish has access to Ice Beam, and because I'm on Peck instead of Dragon Breath, I don't have nearly the fast food pressure that I normally would here. I fire off the Sky Attack as soon as I get there, Qwilfish will put up the shield, and now I have a very tough game of whether they bait or whether they nuke. I put up the shield, I get the shield call right, but even with that, I still feel like I'm in a pretty awkward spot. My opponent has identical pacing to me, and they always win charge attack priority, so I'm just not going to throw. Instead, I'm just going to full commit to the farm down. They're going to bank a move for later, send in a Talonflame, but this is by no means an answer to Altaria. It's a Shadow Talon as well. Sky Attack inflicts massive damage. I fire off Sky Attack number 2, and when they shield, I'm going to pivot into Credilli. That Bank to Aqua Tail on the Shadow Qwilfish is a very big problem because that is basically a delete button for my Incineroar and I have no shields left to hide behind. Fly does big damage on a Credilli. I'm going to fire off the Rock Tomb as soon as I get there to ensure that no extra damage lands on this Credilli. Down goes Talonflame. In the back is Spiritomb. And the fact that I threw instantly and did not let the second Incinerate land ends up mattering massively as I'm able to make a Rock Tomb. Grass Knot would do more damage, but I need the debuff because I'm going to have to take a super effective Rock Tomb on Incineroar. I'm going to predict that my opponent goes for the combination play after they fire off the Rock Tomb, so I switch. I send in Altaria, they don't go for the combination play, they stay in with the Spiritomb. I'm able to outpace and make the Sky Attack. Sky Attack will be knocking out the Spiritomb. My opponent's going to have to fire off energy pretty instantly here with the Qwilfish. Qwilfish is very low. Can Aqua Tail take the knockout? It does not. I get one additional peck. Do they have the move? They do not. Incineroar KOs the Qwilfish, and we're able to take the win. We've got a blast from the past in the next match as I lead Altaria into Noctowl. This is definitely a matchup where having Peck is a big hindrance for the Altaria. Dragon Breath would do more damage overall, meaning that in theory I should be able to Dragon Breath them into double Sky Attack range. But with Peck not doing as much damage, it looks like Noctowl is actually going to be able to win this matchup. Unfortunately, I have no concept as to what could be behind a Noctowl lead because it's not like Noctowl is run very commonly. Noctowl goes for a second Shadow Ball, winning charge attack priority, and I go for Sky Attack number 2. I don't really want to pivot out of the matchup, so I decide I'm just going to stay in, let the Noctowl farm me down, and then get a 1 acid head start on Credilli. My opponent sends in a Shadow Swampert, and this is really not looking good. Swampert is going to win charge attack priority over Credilli. I'm going to put up the shield and go for a pretty obvious Rock Tomb. If my opponent calls the Rock Tomb, I kind of just lose on the spot, but I have to try something. Rock Tomb does get shielded. My opponent pivots. It's in Quagsire in the back. Oh my goodness. This is absolutely horrendous. There is no play for Incineroar whatsoever. They fire off the Aqua Tail on charge attack priority tied to the Grass Knot. I go for the Grass Knot. I'm expecting my opponent is just going to let this go and then sweep me with the Swampert. Back in comes the Swampert. There's really no way out unless I fully sacrifice the Incineroar. If they just one-hit KO me, I win the game, and they know it. They go for an undercharge, but they undercharge way too much. Incineroar's gonna make a move, but I lose charge attack priority. Incineroar has a significantly higher attack stat than Swampert. They must be running like a 15-0-0 Swampert to win that charge attack priority tie, and I'm just in absolute shambles. If they didn't have one of the worst possible Shadow Swampert IV combinations, I could have won the game, but their Swampert is so bad that it wins charge attack priority over Incineroar, and unfortunately, we lose a heartbreaking game. Hopping into the final match, we get a Dream lead Altaria into Trash Wormadam. My opponent safe switches into Licky, and in this meta, it really feels like you're at a big competitive advantage just having a good answer to a Licky safe switch. If you don't have a good answer to a Licky safe switch, the team is probably not going to be particularly strong, because Licky is everywhere. It is inescapable. Rock Tomb lands, big damage onto Licky. They can go for another Shadow Ball, but at -1 suddenly, this is not really going to do much of anything. I can probably get away with going for a Rock Tomb here, but I fire off the Grass Knot just because I don't want to mess around with any 1 HP survives. My opponent puts up the shield, and this is actually even better for me because I'm ABA strong into Wormadam. I have Incineroar and I have the Altaria, so I don't need switch. I send in Altaria. My opponent's very heavily debuffed. They pivot out, and they have their own Altaria in the back. Peck, again, proves to be substantially worse here in an Altaria mirror. So, I'm just going to try and spam out as many Sky Attacks as I possibly can. My health bar is getting absolutely torn to smithereens by these Dragon Breaths. Sky Attack will be shielded. Now the question is, can I make another Sky Attack? It's going to be very, very close. They go for the Sky Attack. I stay in. I realize I'm not going to get there, and I'm forced to pivot out into Incineroar. I do have a 2-0 shield advantage in this endgame, and I am absolutely going to need it. Shield number 1 goes to the Sky Attack. Incineroar barely able to outpace the Altaria, and this Brutal Swing will take the knockout. There is still a Licky lurking in the back, and it does have a decent amount of energy. But what it does not have is a lot of HP. I put up the shield because what's Wormadam going to do? Wormadam can't really damage the Incineroar. I get the Fire Fang down. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. All in all, I did end up having some very fun games with Incineroar. I'll be honest, Jungle Cup is not one of my most favorite metas that I've ever played, so I just wanted to try and have some fun today. As of the time of recording, this is the final day before I leave for my trip this weekend, so I wanted to try and run something fun, blow off some steam, and I feel like this team fit the bill. Peck definitely felt like a liability on Altaria in quite a few games. The reason I put Peck on Altaria for this team is I really wanted to have a better matchup into the Togekiss, but unfortunately, I felt like in a lot of games, I ended up learning why Altaria frequently runs Dragon Breath. Dragon Breath is just so much better neutrally that even though you make a few niche matchups better by going for Peck, overall, Peck just ends up feeling very underwhelming in matchups where there's a lot of neutral damage. As far as Incineroar goes, it's going to be very feast or famine. I intentionally ran it on Fire Fang, specifically to obliterate Forretress. I wanted to have a Mon where if my opponent safe switched Forretress, they just lost the game, and Incineroar definitely fit the bill. Unfortunately, by opting for Fire Fang over a more flexible fast move like Double Kick, it does make Incineroar very RPS, where there's quite a few games, especially with like the double water backline, where I just didn't really have much of any play, because Incineroar is very feast or famine, and I feel like that's the case for a lot of spicier Mon. They're going to have their matchups where they're going to dominate, but unfortunately they're going to have their matchups where they get completely obliterated as well. I think that when it comes to finding something spicy to run, if you're wanting to go that route, trying to pick something that targets one of the most used Pokemon in the meta is probably the way to go. Because a Pokemon can be fun, but if it doesn't really have any meta targets, then it's probably going to end up losing a lot more than it wins. Granted, the Incineroar team only won one more game than it lost, so it did bat around 500, but it was a pretty enjoyable way to spend Go Battle Thursday. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so sincerely appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.